You're listening to Play and Record. I'm Al English, and this is the story of a life shaped by music. And just to recap on part 2, it was all about computer games. Talked about really old consoles like the Sinclair Spectrum, onto the Amiga, the Mega Drive, and the impact that it was having in general. We also talked about computers, the very first Windows that I remember being Windows 95. And that was the first time I remember people getting computers inside their houses. And that's where I first started messing with music, using a demo of some software that came free with a cereal box, and it was called Dance EJ.
Welcome to the Dance EJ. Check successfully completed.
That led on to discovering drums at the end of primary school, and I just knew that's exactly what I wanted to do. So when I'm putting these little 20-minute podcast chunks together, I sort of have to narrow it down into like various chunks. And it's difficult, you know, because when you're looking at a timeline, it's not always very linear. Things tend to overlap, don't they, which makes it more difficult when you're trying to tell the story. So this episode is a tale of 3 sides. So when I joined high school in year 7, they had a drum teacher that was like in school. He used to come in and teach the students. So it was a win-win for me because A, I got to learn the drums, and B, I got to go out of lesson for half an hour a week, whatever lesson I was in at that time. I used to go, see you later, I'm off to my drum lesson. So it was a win-win. And straight away from the start, I loved it. We had a great teacher, he was called Jim. He used to play on the cruise ships, and he was so talented. He used to play things like the marimba, had a real Latin sort of style to his drumming as well, which was really cool. So we're going to come back to drumming, but just know that it was going on in the background all the way through these next bits that I'm about to tell you. So I didn't have a drum kit at home. It was very new. I was learning the drums in school and I was loving it. But at home, I had another interest as well as computer games, which was also going on. So around this time, I was hugely into mountain biking. All my friends had cool mountain bikes, and I just had to have one. The bike that I had wasn't good enough, so I saved up. I had 3 paper rounds at one point, and I was saving up enough money to build my own mountain bike. So I had a frame, a hand-me-down from some other kid from up the road that I carried back a couple of miles one night after school, handlebars from a different kid, some wheels from someone else. But after putting this bike together, that was probably one of the best summers I ever had. We spent most of the time racing around, and there's a park about a mile from where I used to live called Edgerton Park, and there used to be quite a big dirt jump on that park. It wasn't like an intentional dirt jump, but if you approached it from the right angle, wow, you could get some air. And I had to work up the courage after seeing all my friends do this jump. But eventually I worked up the courage and I managed to go over this jump, and I absolutely loved it, and it just like lit a fire in me. I would never do it now. I seem to remember the weather being really good those couple of summers as well, so that really helped. So I also had a BMX, I remember at one point, a little rally burner, I seem to remember, which was probably because I was playing the Dave Mirror BMX game on the PlayStation. And everyone used to buy this magazine called Mountain Biking UK, or MBUK as we used to call it, and it was available monthly, and everyone used to race to the newsagents to get it because we all kind of lived in the same area, so the newsagents only stocked so many copies, so whoever could get there first got their hands on a copy. And I seem to remember having early access at that point because, like I say, I was doing several paper rounds to pay for all these mad little parts I was putting on my bike and improvements. And one day, the brand new issue came in, MBUK, and it had a VHS tape on the front cover. It was called Real Sick. So Real Sick was a mountain biking video full of people going down ridiculous slopes, on very high-end mountain bikes. Now this one was a brand new one, but I had previously seen some tapes called Sprung, and the main thing I loved about these videos is the music. There was some music that you just didn't hear anywhere else. I think Mark B and Blade had a track on there, I think Split Personalities was on there, but Real Sick had awesome music as well. But the main thing that I loved about that tape was the music. There was tracks from bands that I would later learn to be the Mad Caddies. The Hives. I saw the Hives a good few times many years later. Also Whippersnapper. So at the time, I'd only ever heard a little bit of underground music on the radio late at night. It still gives me goosebumps when I listen to some of these tracks because I used to watch that video all the time and it just made me want to go out, get on the bike, and I'd still have this music ringing in my ears. And it's mad, you know, because this is some of the audio from the actual tape, and when you go on YouTube and you read some of the comments, people are like, oh my god, this is so nostalgic, core memory unlocked, you know, so it's not just me. Now unfortunately all this was going to come to an end very soon, because one night some thieves broke into my garage and stole my bike. So this is the bike that I had done so many paper rounds to pay for, and it was nowhere near as good as the bikes my friends had. But I'd worked very hard for it, so I loved it to pieces. But unfortunately someone else had their eye on it, broke into the garage, and yeah, that was the end of that. Now the good thing is, I did get one back on the insurance. The bad side of it is, it took about a year for this to happen, by which time I'd found a new interest.
Tony Hawk's pro skater. Now everyone thinks they can skate like Tony.
So I think after the bike got nicked, I went back to the computer games, right? Because what else was I going to do? And one of my friends had just got a Sega Dreamcast. Don't know if you remember the Dreamcast, but it was a cool thing, and I still think it was a bit underrated. It got quite a hard press at the time. I used to think it was good. There were some good games on it. Soul Calibur was great, but the one I was really mad on was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater.
The nights are all long. I'm singing the song to try and make
This game just made you want to go out and skateboard, so that's pretty much what I did. Next thing you knew, we all had skateboards and we were all descending on local concrete to practice our kickflips and ollies. Now I need to give respect where respect is due to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. The soundtrack was incredible. I remember loving the Goldfinger song, Superman. Still makes me smile. I also had music from Primus, Dead Kennedys, and also you had AIM, Ain't Got Time to Waste. That was a head turner. So because I've been watching all these skate videos, mountain biking videos, I naturally wanted to make my own. I borrowed a video camera off my Uncle Dave. It was like one of them ones that you put little tapes in. And I'd hatched this plan because I had no way of editing it and I didn't know a clue about how to edit anything back then. So my plan involved having a little Sony Walkman with the music of my choice on the Walkman, and then I would tape the Walkman to the camera, and it gets better. There was little earphones that came out of the Walkman, and I found out where the microphone was on the camera, and I taped the earphone onto the microphone. And you know what? It actually sounded all right. We'd done this really shocking, terribly awful skate video on Walmsley School, which is the school that I used to go to up in Edgerton. And it also made me realise around that time just how hated skateboarders are, and just how entitled old people can be as well. I mean, if I was old, I don't know about, I might change my mind when I actually am really old, but the way I would see it now, if I saw some kids smashing up a bus stop, which was happening all the time when I was a kid, I would discourage such behaviour. But if I saw some kids getting about having fun on a skateboard, that to me is not even on the same page. However, I quickly realised that other people didn't see it that way. We got chased off everywhere, we got the police called on us, we got some very unhappy people, for at the end of the day we were just trying to have fun. So back at home I was mainly listening to music on tape recorders. I had like a little stereo boombox tape recorder type thing. I'd worked out how to record audio from one side to the other. And my friends were buying the latest tapes and I was cheekily just copying them. It was that sort of a weird time, because if you were to walk into a music shop you wouldn't see any records on the shelves. You would see tapes, which were kind of on the way out. Mostly by then people bought CDs, but there were still tapes on the shelves. I also remember buying Eminem, Hi, My Name Is on tape. And I first heard that pretty late at night when I couldn't sleep. I turned on the radio and I heard the full explicit version and I was hooked. So I'm glad I actually caught the tail end of that analog tape technology, because it's really coming in handy now. Now we're doing lots of different tapes. Tapes have somehow had a massive resurgence, so I'm making more tapes now than I ever have done. And people in school used to pass around tapes quite a lot. A lot of popular kids used to be into this type of music that we called donk. Back then people just used to call it pier. Now pier meant Wigan Pier, which was obviously in Wigan. It had a history of Northern Soul and things like that, but none of these kids knew anything about that. They were just interested in what it currently stood for, which was donk.
You know what you want to do with that, right? You want to put a banging donk on it. Yeah, that's sick, that is sick. I can definitely drop it.
The best way I can describe donk is probably like an offshoot of hard house music, if you've ever heard hard house. It's definitely got some sounds from hard house. But the main difference is it tends to be mixed with loads of really poppy, girly vocal stuff, which is naturally sped up to meet the tempo, making everybody sound like chipmunks. This was and still is hugely popular around the north, particularly in Wigan, Bolton, Blackburn, and I think Newcastle go nuts for it as well, I've heard. And people used to pass around tapes. Now I had zero interest in any of this music, however I did respect that people were just recording things and passing them around. It was a really nice thing to see, because that is something that is completely dead now. People don't do that anymore. I also remember everybody having the classic mini hi-fi system, which was a tiny little black tower, CD on top, tape cassette at the bottom, and two little speakers. I used to mess about with this all the time and try and record things and try and loop them effectively onto the tape. So there was a bit that I'd like in a CD and I'd cue it up and I'd try and record it and hit it just at the right time, but I could never get it, so the beats were seamless. So the other side of music, new metal, was kicking off massively. You had bands like Papa Roach, Linkin Park, who we had no interest in. We were too cool for those two. And even to this day, people say, "What? You don't even like Linkin Park? Not even the stuff with Jay-Z?" And I just go, "No, I don't." And people are shocked, but it's the truth. Same with Limp Bizkit. Not my cup of tea, didn't feel it. And also, a massive thing that was happening was the internet. Now, I had zero clue about anything to do with the internet. until I went to my friend Rob's house. Now, Rob's dad, he had his ear to the ground because he worked for BT. So, as you can imagine, BT Communications, they were first up when it came to the internet. So, one day, I came to Rob's house and he had the internet installed. And I had never seen anything like this before. And we were absolutely blown away by it. And we were shocked, honestly shocked by some of the awful stuff that you could just access. If anyone remembers the early days of the internet, things like steakandcheese.com, rotten.com, what the hell was that shit, man? I'm surprised that didn't scar me for life. Kids should not have access to that shit at all. Just pictures of people who have just blown their heads off. I don't want to see that. I don't even think I wanted to see it then, but you just couldn't not look when a friend showed it you. The internet was fucked back then. Rob also introduced me to films. I was already into watching films, but Rob really opened my eyes to a whole new world of stuff that I just hadn't seen. He had a big house and he had like his own little lounge that he was allowed to chill in with his own VCR in. We used to watch stuff that we were far too young to watch, like Predator, all the Arnold Schwarzenegger stuff, Terminator, The Running Man, the Nightmare on Elm Street collection, just anything that was unsuitable. The Exorcist, The Shining, you name it, we were watching it.
You son of a bitch! What's the matter? The CIA got you pushing too many pencils?
Shortly after this, there was a groundbreaking program that you could download. It was called Napster.
You downloaded a lot of songs. Says here you even downloaded Judas Priest? That's hard time you boys are looking at.
Didn't think it was that big a deal.
Not a big deal? You think downloading music for free is not a big deal?
So it's really funny to this day how angry Lars Ulrich from Metallica became about Napster.
This is the home of Lars Ulrich, the drummer from Metallica. Look, there's Lars now, sitting by his pool.
What's the matter with him?
This month he was hoping to have a gold-plated Shark Tank bar installed right next to the pool, but thanks to people downloading his music for free, he must now wait a few months before he can afford it.
Just Google it, it's really funny if you don't know. He took a massive stand against Napster, and everyone ripped him for it and continues to rip him for it. Napster was a program, it was a file sharing program, peer-to-peer, I believe, and you basically had a search bar and you could search for anything. You could download songs, you could download films. Most people, like myself, just used it for music, and we were able to download all of this stuff for free. So when you walk into the music shop, you might only have a tenner on you and you can go, oh, I'd like to buy that, I'd like to buy that. I'd like to buy that. Which one do I buy? I'll have them all. And I'll also have all that other shit that I don't want as well. It was like being a kid in a candy store and you just downloaded everything. And I had this humongous collection. This is where I started to download loads of different types of music. And it would open my eyes to loads of different styles. And it gave me access to things that were previously inaccessible. It also gave me the opportunity to give my computer aids. Napster, LimeWire, Kazaa, all those type of programs. They were basically like digital petri dishes, full of germs and viruses that would just eat your computer alive. Like everybody else, I got stung with this multiple times. But you couldn't just get your phone out and Google the problem, how to fix it. So once again, I had no money to fix all this stuff. I didn't know who could fix it, even if I did have money. So I just learned how to fix it myself. So I actually owe Kazaa, Napster, LimeWire quite a lot, because it showed me how to wipe a computer, how to put it all back, and it's some knowledge that I still use to this day. So mainly a lot of punk, but the odd bit of hip hop starting to sneak through here and there. So we used to go to a skate park at the other end of town. It was called Bones. I would later find out why they called it Bones. There was some great music. I remember this is where I first heard Organ Donor by DJ Shadow. Obviously, I didn't know that's what it was at the time. I would later find out. Certain songs, when I hear them, even if I just hear them one time, if they leave an impact on me, it's like I can record them. But it was a warehouse that had holes in the ceiling. There was buckets collecting rainwater, and the place was just a huge skate park full of half pipes, spines, bowls, everything. And we used to regularly go down to this place. I'm not ashamed to say that I was too shit scared to go on the vast majority of things. There was this one ramp called the Vert, and it was the biggest half pipe they had. And they called it the Vert because when you got up to the top, the start of it, you could see the first half a metre or maybe a metre, maybe longer than that, was vertical. And you had to drop down into that on a skateboard or BMX, and nah, I couldn't even do the small one. I'm not ashamed to say I used to go down this big ramp called the S ramp and then over this jump in the middle, and yeah, pretty basic. Anything I accomplished at Bones. One time I got quite brave and started attempting to go over a spine, and these ramps are high, so you can't see over them. So I was going over one side, and then on the other side there was a rollerblader coming over, and we both smashed into each other, and he hit my arm with the rollerblade as he came over, not intentionally, just in the crash. And yeah, my arm was not in a good way. I remember taking a few minutes out and going into the little reception area and trying to use the vending machine, and then I knew there was a problem when I couldn't lift my arm to put money into the machine. Probably the man responsible for that music blasting out of the warehouse was a guy called Leroy. Leroy is the guy that I met when I broke my arm. I would later find out that he came from sort of the same area, same neck of the woods as me, and he also was related to some of my friends in a weird way. Leroy had later helped me along my way in the early days of hip-hop, but for now he was just helping me repair my arm. So he rang my mum, and I got to hospital pretty soon, and the next thing you know, I had the sling on. So this break was pretty bad. It took I seem to remember it taking about 12 weeks to heal. So 12 weeks with this awful cast on my arm. Anyone who's had that knows how horrible it is. But the main thing that was annoying me is that I couldn't play drums. It was so boring. I couldn't do anything. So I had to forfeit the drum lessons. The only good thing that came out of that situation is that I didn't have to write in class, because it was my right arm and that was the writing arm. And I remember milking that one for as long as I could, even after the arm got better. But soon enough, it started to heal, and I got back on the drums. Now this became my number one go-to pastime, passion, everything. I seemed to take to it quite quickly, and I just carried on going, and I just wanted to get better and better. I'd done some performances at school in percussion groups, and also joined some local orchestra. They were looking for a drummer, and I think I did a few weeks with them, but it just wasn't my thing. Those computer game soundtracks had just cemented my love for punk rock. My favourite band was Blink 182. I was absolutely mad on Blink. I remember I had tickets to go and watch them in 2001, but 9/11 happened, and like pretty much everything that year, it got cancelled. I also went to watch The Offspring, and they were supported by a band called AFI from California, and I seem to remember getting really into them as well at the time. I went to a gig at the Manchester Apollo when I was about 14, called Deconstruction 2. I think it was a Deconstruction Punk Tour. And there was bands like Pennywise, Capdown. I remember Deconstruction being a real eye-opener. But it's sort of all tied together, because in all the music videos for like your Blink 182 and your Offspring, it was all skateboarding. The culture was all sort of cemented together. And that of course went with the fashion as well, and it's funny when you look back, because you start to rebel against the things that you don't like. So like in my case it was things like tracksuits and dance music. So you don't want to conform to any of that. Oddly enough, the next move that you make is just to conform to something else. Probably a bit of a rite of passage, really, isn't it? So next thing I knew, I was wearing baggy jeans, massive skate shoes, hoodies with like bands on the back like Slipknot. I bought the Slipknot album, and I think I bought it because I thought my parents are going to hate this. Didn't actually like it. Told everyone I liked it. I even bought a Slipknot hoodie. It's more of a statement, I think, back then, isn't it? I also went to watch bands like Korn and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So I was just going in on music at this point. Any opportunity I got to go and watch something new, I was doing it. So when you're spending all of your free time playing the drums, the next gradual and obvious step is to join a band. I didn't really know how to go about any of this, but I did know it was something I really wanted to do. So there was a few friends in school, some of them played guitar. We decided to try and form a band. Now I'm so glad there's no recordings of any of this. And to be honest, if there were, I definitely would not play them anyway. But it did not go well. I didn't even understand how to put a band together. I didn't know what a bass guitar was. I just had a drum kit and I wanted 2 guitars. And someone said to me, "Where's the bass guitar?" And I was like, "What? Bass guitar?" You know, I had no clue what I was doing. All I had was my very first drum kit at home and a couple of friends that used to come around on the weekends with their little lunchbox sized amplifiers and Fender Squier guitars. And we'd spend most of our time fannying around and arguing. So I think how I'm going to finish this episode is a little story about when I got an opportunity to go and join someone else's band. I can't remember exactly how this came about, but I think it was a friend of mine called Chris, and I think his parents knew someone whose kids were in a band. The band was called Y2K, and my friend's mum had told me that they were looking for a drummer. She knew how batshit crazy I was about drumming, and she straight away mentioned me. And conveniently, they had a gig coming up in a pub. They did have a drummer there, but I think he was leaving or joining a different band or something, I can't remember. But we went along to this gig, and we watched the band. I think it was a 4-piece band with drums, bass, guitar, and a singer. The singer, I think, was called Vicky. Now, the guitarist, you're going to know who it is. He later joined a band called McFly. Yeah, seriously. It was Danny Jones. So Danny Jones was in a band called Y2K, and they were playing covers, things like Bon Jovi, you know, usual sort of pub go-to hits that everyone was loving. At the time, I was turning my nose up at this and I was going, no, it's not really my cup of tea, this. But anyway, I'd soon agreed to go up to their house and have a little jam with them. So I was in Danny Jones's house, playing drums and jamming with this band. Nothing ever came of it after that. But something became of Danny Jones, something quite big. Anyway, some might say lucky escape, some might say what an idiot. Probably the latter.